International News Edition. His Majesty the King discusses with senior Iraqi officials the situation in their country and efforts to combat terrorism. Saudi border guard is killed and 2 troops wounded by mortar fire from Yemen as the air campaign against Houthi rebels continues. And European nations put forward new proposals to tackle a migration crisis in the Mediterranean as 900 people are feared dead in a shipwreck. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. His Majesty the King received Iraqi Parliament Speaker Salim al-Jabouri, Vice President Osama al-Nujayfi and Deputy Prime Minister Saleh al-Mitlaq. King Abdullah and the Iraqi officials discussed the situation in Iraq and the government's efforts to fight terrorist organizations as well as other regional developments. His Majesty stressed Jordan's support to Iraq to restore the country's security, stability and sovereignty. The King said Jordan backed the Iraqi political process to achieve national reconciliation and build a strong and united Iraq. In turn, Iraqi officials briefed the King on developments in their country and thanked the kingdom for its support. The United States and its allies launched 36 airstrikes targeting Daesh militants in Iraq and Syria since early Sunday. The combined joint task force leading the operations said 10 strikes in Syria hit targets near Al-Hasaka and Kobani. In Iraq, 26 strikes hit tactical units, vehicles and buildings near Ramadi, Mosul, Fallujah and other locations. In northern Iraq, Kurdish authorities said their forces, backed by US-led coalition airstrikes, drove Daesh militants from an 84 square kilometer area in northern Iraq over the weekend. The fresh gains widen a buffer zone around the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. The Kurdistan Region Security Council said in a statement at least 35 insurgents had been killed by its Peshmerga forces in the offensive south of Kirkuk, which began on Saturday on 2 fronts. In Anbar province, tensions are running high between Kurdish forces and Daesh as the Iraqi security forces continue their battles against the militants. The Kurdish soldiers said they are usually attacked by the Daesh militants hidden in the forest near a river crossing bridge in the west of Guer. The body of a man believed to be Izzat al-Duri, a top aide to former President Saddam Hussein, was handed over to the Iraqi government by a Shiite militia. After the 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq, Duri was ranked 6th on the US military's list of 55 most wanted Iraqis, and a $10 million reward was offered for his capture. Iraqi and US officials accused Duri of organizing and leading the insurgency that swept the country in 2005 to 2007. He was reported killed by Iraqi forces and Shiite militias during fighting last week. A Saudi border guard was killed and 2 troops wounded by heavy gun and mortar fire from Yemen. Several members of Saudi Arabia's forces have been killed since the country and its allies began bombing the Iran-allied Houthi group in Yemen last month. Meanwhile, coalition airstrikes continue targeting Houthi rebels across the country. Here's more.
A Scud missile base in the Yemeni capital Sana'a takes a direct hit. The facility was one of a number of targets of the Houthi rebel group struck by Saudi-led warplanes. A source said the air raids demolished parts of the Faj'atan mountain, hoping to uncover and destroy Scud missiles. The blast hit the base beside Hadda district, home to the presidential palace and many embassies, and sent a thick pillar of smoke into the air. 7 people were reported killed and dozens injured. The attack also damaged a television station owned by ex-President Ali Abdullah Saleh, knocking its signal off air and wounding several people. The blast also struck near many foreign embassies, including Indonesia's. Indonesia's Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi told a news conference in Jakarta that the blast caused no serious casualties.
Thank God there were no casualties, but 2 of the embassy staff and 1 Indonesian were injured.
Since late March, the Arab military coalition has been attacking the Iran-allied Houthi rebels as part of Operation Decisive Storm. The campaign has repeatedly targeted the Faj'atan facility, along with other military bases and airports in Sana'a, and throughout the country. The explosions in Sana'a came as fighting intensified elsewhere in Yemen. In the southern port of Aden, Houthi militiamen, along with military units loyal to former President Saleh, are battling youths and forces loyal to internationally organized President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. The anti-Houthi fighters said they repelled an attack on a key district of Aden. Hiba Al-Atoum for the news at 10.
The Syrian army said it had captured several villages in the southern province of Daraa. The advance would cut a supply route used by insurgents to smuggle weapons and fighters to Damascus's eastern Ghouta region. A Syrian security source said today's operation was part of a wider plan to secure the province of Daraa. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said the intelligence services of his country are in contact with their counterparts in France. During a television interview, Assad said there are some contacts, but there's no cooperation. There was no comments from Paris, which has severed diplomatic ties with Assad and insists he must leave power. The European Union proposed doubling the size of its Mediterranean search and rescue operations to address a migration crisis. European leaders met as the first bodies were brought ashore of some 900 people feared killed in the deadliest shipwreck while trying to reach Europe. 3 other rescue operations were underway to save hundreds more migrants in peril in overloaded vessels making the journey from the northern coast of Africa to Europe. This report has more.
The Mediterranean Sea is becoming a cemetery without tombstones for migrants. Rescuers are attempting to reach 2 boats in distress in the Mediterranean. The search continued for survivors of what is feared will be one of the worst disasters involving migrants trying to perilous crossing to Europe from Africa. Men, women and scores of children were fleeing their countries, hoping for a better life in Europe, but believed to have drowned when their boat capsized north of Libya. Officials estimate that over 900 people have drowned in the Mediterranean and just 28 survivors arrived in Malta after what was described a journey through hell. More than 17 vessels were searching for survivors, led by the Italian Coast Guard and including several merchant ships. European Union foreign ministers gathered in Luxembourg and were under pressure to produce more than words in response to the latest Mediterranean migrant tragedy.
I felt it was our moral duty to concentrate also on our responsibility as Europeans to prevent this kind of tragedies to happen again and again.
British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said efforts would need to include targeting those behind this human suffering.
That response has got to include targeting the criminals who are managing this traffic in human suffering. We've got to tackle them. We've got to work upstream in the countries from which these people are coming, and we are determined to put an end to this vile trade.
Germany also said it will do everything it can to fight human traffickers and prevent migrants from drowning in the Mediterranean.
First, we must and will do everything to take on and continue the fight against human traffickers. Second, we will work intensively for the causes for the flight. And third, we will do everything we can to prevent more victims dying an agonizing death in the Mediterranean in front of our doorstep.
In his reaction, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the tragedy highlights yet again the need to address the plight of migrants.
Record numbers of people are fleeing war and persecution. As migrants face discrimination, violence and exploitation, they urgently need our protection during their hour of greatest need.
The European ministers face criticism from aid and human rights groups that they have been abandoning those in need of help. European Council President Donald Tusk called EU leaders together for an extraordinary summit on Thursday to discuss a joint response to the flow of migrants from North Africa. Loy Balkar for the news at 10.
Australia and Iran agreed to share intelligence about Australians fighting with militant groups in Iraq. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop said the deal will help both countries in their efforts to tackle Daesh. She added that Australia would have access to information gathered by Iranian operatives in Iraq. Bishop spoke after her meeting with President Hassan Rouhani during her first visit to Tehran. She said Australia began looking into the idea of sharing some information with Iran in 2014. An Egyptian court sentenced 22 members of the Muslim Brotherhood to death. Another defendant, who is a juvenile, was given a 10-year sentence. They were convicted over an attack on a police station in a district outside Cairo in 2013. The attack was part of a wave of violence that rocked the country after the army removed Islamist President Mohamed Morsi from power following mass protests against his rule in June 2013. A lawyer for the convicted men said they would appeal. Egyptian authorities have jailed thousands of suspected members of the Brotherhood, and the courts have sentenced hundreds to death. The defendants were convicted of murder, attempted murder, and the destruction of public facilities, among other charges, during an attack on a police station in which one policeman was killed. Also in Egypt, 3 Egyptian soldiers were killed after an armored vehicle was bombed in the town of Rafah in northern Sinai. The Egyptian army and police conducted a widespread military operation to crack down on terrorists and criminal elements in Sinai. The Egyptian affiliate of Daesh terror group claimed responsibility for the attack. Back here at home, His Majesty the King handed awards to winners of King Abdullah II Award for World Interfaith Harmony Week. He handed the awards in a ceremony attended by senior officials and royal family members. World Interfaith Harmony Week was launched by King Abdullah, who put it forward to the 56th session of the UN General Assembly and was unanimously adopted in October 2010. The Royal Al-Bayt Institute for Islamic Thought established the award in recognition of 3 activities or publications that best contribute to the promotion of World Interfaith Harmony Week. Interfaith Harmony Week is annually marked in the first week of February. The winners came from 3 countries, Pakistan, Germany and Canada. The Interfaith Week is an annual platform to raise awareness and understanding among followers of the different faiths and promote dialogue and goodwill through activities and events to spread this message. His Majesty the King stressed the need to put in place a clear national strategy with a specific and practical time frame to address challenges facing the education sector. The King was addressing the head and members of the National Committee for Human Resources Development held at Al Husseiniya Palace in the presence of Her Majesty Queen Rania and Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour. The King emphasized the importance of enhancing citizens' confidence in the quality and efficiency of the education system and developing this vital sector in such a way that ensures development of human resources. He said the committee's agenda and vision should conform to the 10-year economic blueprint and complement efforts made by the Royal Consultative Committee for Education. The meeting highlighted the need for a 10-year executive plan that includes all stages of education, in addition to a national conference to endorse it. In comments during the meeting, Queen Rania said developing education is a top priority as the sector is key to enhancing the competence and capabilities of Jordanians. She stressed the importance of implementing the strategy and objectively addressing challenges facing the education sector. 6 people were killed, including 4 from the United Nations Children Fund UNICEF, when Somalia's Al-Shabaab militants bombed a minivan carrying staff to a United Nations office in the semi-autonomous Puntland region. UNICEF said in a statement that the attack occurred when the staff were traveling to the office from their guest house nearby and that 4 more of its staff were seriously wounded. The UN Special Representative for Somalia said 2 guards also died in the attack. Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. The militant group has staged a string of attacks in Somalia and surrounding countries. A police officer at the scene of the attack said Kenyans and Somalis had been killed, but UNICEF said its staff hailed from a range of countries. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was granted a 28-day extension to build a coalition after winning elections on March the 17th. The right-wing Likud leader's request to the president for extra time was not unusual in Israel, where no one party has ever won an outright majority in a parliamentary election. Negotiations among potential political partners over cabinet posts and policy have often gone down to the wire. President Rivlin tasked Netanyahu with putting together a coalition after consultations with legislators following the election. Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party came out on top in the poll. It won 30 of Parliament's 120 seats and defeated its main rival, the centre-left Zionist Union, led by Isaac Herzog. China and Pakistan launched a plan for energy and infrastructure projects in Pakistan worth $46 billion. China's President Xi Jinping is in Pakistan to oversee the signing of agreements aimed at establishing a Pakistan-China economic corridor between Pakistan's southern Gwadar port on the Arabian Sea and China's western Xinjiang region. The plan is part of China's aim to forge Silk Road land and sea ties to markets in the Middle East and Europe. The Chinese leader said it cemented a strategic cooperative partnership between the neighbors. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said the corridor would transform Pakistan into a regional hub and enable China to create a shorter and cheaper route for trade and investment with South, Central, West Asia and the Middle East and Africa. Italian Valentino Rossi won the Argentine MotoGP Grand Prix with a thrilling display. The win came after a clash with world champion Marc Marquez in the second-last lap that saw the Spaniard crash out. Championship leader Rossi won with more than a 5-second lead over second-place compatriot Andrea Dovizioso. Britain's Carl Crutchlow finished third. The 9-times world champion showed he's back to his best as he moved up to second place behind Marquez on the 11th lap. To the European Champions League, Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain fans are on tenterhooks waiting for tomorrow's quarter-final second leg. Former Barcelona striker Zlatan Ibrahimovic will not miss the clash, adding extra excitement. The 33-year-old striker missed the first leg, won 3-1 by Barcelona last week because of a one-match ban during the Champions League last 16 match at Chelsea. The Swede played the 2009-2010 season for Barcelona, scoring 16 goals in 29 games. Barca coach Luis Enrique has his hopes on talismanic striker Lionel Messi. Finally, the weather outlook. Mild tonight in most regions and fair across the Jordan Valley. A low of 22 degrees is forecast for the Dead Sea area. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperatures will create some pleasantly warm weather across much of the hilly areas and relatively hot in the Jordan Valley. Winds will be northwesterly brisk, blowing dust across much of the southern region. The city of Aqaba should expect a hot day. Winds in the Red Sea port will be northerly brisk and the sea slightly choppy. The weatherman cautions motorists against dusty weather, especially in the country's south. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To close, our top stories once again. His Majesty the King discusses with senior Iraqi officials the situation in that country and efforts to combat terrorism. A Saudi border guard is killed and 2 troops wounded by mortar fire from Yemen as the air campaign against Houthis continues. And European nations put forward new proposals to tackle a migration crisis in the Mediterranean as 900 people are feared dead in a shipwreck. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Rad Lupouche. Thank you so much for your time.